a flawless facade and a dark secret. They were three sisters who seemed to have everything: vast wealth, renowned last names, and a legendary mother pushing them toward the highest ranks of American aristocracy. Minnie, Betsy, and Babe Cushing captured headlines at every turn, dazzling the public with their exquisite taste and storied marriages. But beneath the polished veneer, beyond the glittering ballrooms, the designer gowns, and the carefully staged photos, lay shadows that no amount of money could conceal. A relentless mother shaped their destinies. Betrayals shattered friendships. Illness and regret crept in when they least expected it. The Cushing sisters rose so high that they practically became American royalty. Minnie married into the Astor dynasty, Betsy joined forces with the Whitneys, and Babe claimed her throne beside media magnate Bill Paley. Each union had the ring of a fairy tale, yet behind the scenes, secrets simmered and heartbreak lurked. Their dramatic story poses one burning question: did they actually control their futures, or were they merely pawns in a world that prized image above all else? Stay with us as we journey through the hidden chapters of the Cushing sisters. We'll uncover a mother whose ambitions shaped their lives before they took their first steps, a series of marriages that promised everything and often delivered heartbreak, and the final betrayals that tore them apart. By the end, you may wonder whether all that privilege was worth the heavy price they paid. The mother who plotted their path. Long before Minnie, Betsy, and Babe were old enough to dress themselves, their mother, known to everyone as Gogi Cushing, was already mapping out their destinies. Gogi came from Boston society, a world where lineage and propriety mattered almost as much as breathing. She had experienced plenty of social disappointment herself, which turned her into a steely woman determined to see her daughters rise. In her eyes, every marriage was a strategic alliance, a puzzle piece that would secure the sisters' status in the most elite echelons of wealth and power. No detail was too minor. Gogi meticulously chose her daughters' schools, encouraged them to cultivate impeccable manners, and introduced them to every influential family she could find. The sisters were taught the art of conversation, the subtlety of curtsies, the correct tilt of a hat, anything that might impress the gatekeepers of high society. Each daughter absorbed these lessons, though not always in the same way. For Minnie, the oldest, Gogi sensed a calm reserve that might pair well with a name like Astor or Rockefeller. For Betsy, bright and intellectually curious, Gogi envisioned someone whose wealth would allow independence to flourish. And for Babe, the youngest and notably beautiful, Gogi's expectations soared. Babe was the one who could captivate crowds simply by walking into a room, so why not set her sights on the most powerful man in media? Gogi did not just want her daughters to marry well, she wanted them to remain the talk of the town. When Minnie began appearing in social pages alongside Vincent Astor, Gogi saw proof that her plan worked. The moment Betsy snagged John Hay Whitney, known by friends as Jock, Gogi nearly burst with pride. And when Babe walked down the aisle as Mrs. William S. Paley, rumors claimed that Gogi gloated about having placed all three girls in marriages that would forever keep them in the spotlight. Yet no matchmaking genius, not even Gogi, could force harmony behind closed doors. A shared family name and mountain of money could never truly guarantee happiness or fidelity. If Gogi believed that social perfection could shield her daughters from heartache, real life would soon prove her mistaken. Minnie and the Astors bid for freedom. The eldest sister, Minnie, took a path that seemed the most secure. She married Vincent Astor, heir to a legendary fortune, and widely considered one of the richest men in America. From the outside, their wedding appeared to fulfill every fantasy: regal events, press adoration, and the Astor name next to Minnie's in every society column. Yet Minnie quickly realized she was stepping into a gilded prison. Vincent, moody and distant, had his own expectations for a wife. She should be poised, uncomplaining, and comfortable surrendering her interests to the Astor legacy. Over time, Minnie found herself locked in a sterile, loveless arrangement. She had done everything her mother wanted: secured a top-tier name, guaranteed a lavish lifestyle, and still felt suffocated. Despite her mother's mantra that Cushings do not divorce, Minnie considered breaking free. She believed she could protect her own sanity only by leaving Vincent, a decision that would mean forfeiting the Astor millions. But first, she needed a careful plan. Minnie found it unexpectedly when she noticed Vincent's interest in another woman, a recent widow named Brooke Marshall. Far from jealousy, Minnie felt a rush of relief. If Vincent was ready to move on, he would likely agree to grant her a divorce. In a turn of events more dramatic than any Broadway script, Minnie set the stage for Vincent and Brooke to deepen their connection, all while carefully maintaining the image of an uninterested spouse. By 1953, Minnie's divorce was finalized. She collected only a modest settlement, barely a fraction of Vincent's fortune, but to her that freedom was priceless. Her choice infuriated her sisters. They saw Minnie's decision as a personal betrayal to the family brand. Why walk away from the Astor name and its world-shaping wealth? Still, Minnie went on to marry an artist named James Fosberg, a man entirely different from her first husband, openly gay and nowhere near as wealthy. Many in society condemned her choice as reckless. To Minnie, though, it was about claiming a life that was truly her own. But winning her independence did not mean escaping sorrow. Minnie's next decades would feature deeper involvement in the arts and the creation of literary salons in New York. She found pleasure in culture rather than extravagant wealth. Yet every move she made sparked gossip. Some whispered that leaving the Astors was the biggest mistake of her life. Others insisted it was her bravest act of rebellion. Minnie carried on, determined to silence the doubts around her. Even so, Minnie's break from one of America's most powerful families was only the beginning of the Cushing sisters' unraveling. Babe Paley, the high priestess of style. If Minnie represented quiet rebellion, Babe was the iconic goddess of high society. Photographers adored her. Magazines championed her as the gold standard of taste and elegance. She had a seemingly perfect marriage to Bill Paley, the influential head of CBS, whose empire encompassed radio and television at a time when both were exploding in popularity. Babe's every public appearance fueled new trends. The way she knotted a scarf on her purse spawned imitations in every department store. Her hairstyle and fashion sense were declared an art form in themselves. But behind the flash of cameras, Babe's life was not as idyllic as it seemed. Bill Paley thrived in the excitement of building his media conglomerate, but gave minimal attention to family. There were always rumors of affairs. His controlling nature extended to the simplest details of their home, and every corner had to meet his exacting standards. Babe carefully cultivated her role as the perfect hostess, presenting stunning parties at their properties in Manhattan and Long Island. Guests marveled at the decadent menus, jaw-dropping decor, and Babe's pristine outfits, but they rarely noticed her exhaustion and anxiety. She had learned to live with her husband's emotional distance and occasional indiscretions. The day a serious medical condition hit her young daughter, Kate, Babe experienced a devastating crack in her armor. Kate lost all her hair to a rare autoimmune disease, forcing Babe to orchestrate an elaborate effort to hide the condition. Babe insisted on wigs, scarves, and hats at all times, terrified that public discovery might tarnish the air of perfection. Obsessed with controlling everything, from place settings to children's manners, she grew increasingly fragile. Still, her impeccable style and unshakable grace catapulted her to a permanent spot on best-dressed lists, ultimately earning her a coveted place in the Fashion Hall of Fame. Even then, the devotion she once felt for Bill began to fray. She wondered if she had become more of a prop than a wife. Whenever stress overwhelmed her, Babe turned to mild tranquilizers. She confided her most agonizing secrets to a flamboyant writer who had become her close confidant, Truman Capote. Little did she know that this confidant was about to leak her secrets to the world in a cruel betrayal that would break her heart. Betsy Whitney, power and political finesse. While Minnie fled an empire and Babe beautified one, Betsy carved her own niche by partnering with John Hay, Jock Whitney, part of the storied Whitney clan. Jock embodied the old money establishment, but he also had a bold streak. After youthful adventures, he stepped onto the stage of national politics, aligning with moderate Republicans and using his wealth to influence key campaigns. Betsy, fiercely intelligent and refined, was the consummate strategist behind the scenes. She maintained a polite distance from the gossip columns, preferring to avoid the public spotlight unless it served a diplomatic goal. When Jock became U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom during President Eisenhower's administration, Betsy made London her personal stage. She turned the grand Winfield House residence into a center of cultivated hospitality, hosting lunches for the Queen and Thanksgiving dinners that brought together Washington insiders and British royalty. Dignitaries praised Betsy's unflappable composure, subtle charm, and perfect manners. Unlike Babe, Betsy didn't chase magazine covers or revolve her life around couture. Unlike Minnie, she had no intention of leaving her husband for an unconventional second act. Betsy recognized how rare it was to be in a loving marriage built on genuine affection and respect, especially at their level of influence. She refused to jeopardize that. Nevertheless, cracks remained. The sisters sometimes criticized Betsy's controlling approach to her stepchildren and her fierce loyalty to maintaining the Whitney name's pristine reputation. She guarded her privacy so closely that even her nieces and nephews sometimes felt unwelcome in her world. Yet Betsy's greatest satisfaction came from being the quiet anchor for Jock, supporting his political engagements, protecting their philanthropic endeavors, and ensuring that, even in a sphere driven by image, there was true substance behind the Whitney legacy. Where Babe was known for flamboyance and Minnie for independence, Betsy carefully stayed in the middle, projecting a public persona that was calm, generous, and regal. This approach allowed her to preserve her power without unleashing the swirl of scandals that haunted her siblings. But it would not save her from the final heartbreak that awaited them all. Truman Capote, Betrayals and Secrets Exposed. No figure embodied high society gossip quite like Truman Capote. At first, Babe Paley and the other swans of society treated him as an entertaining court jester with literary genius. He had personal access to every glamorous retreat and yacht excursion, collecting precious stories that his wealthy friends never imagined he might weaponize. Even Bill Paley, typically impatient with flamboyance, tolerated Capote's presence for Babe's sake, but Capote loved to stir the pot. He wanted more than acceptance. He craved the validation of being the it person in a realm of old money families. When he published his masterpiece in cold blood, his fame skyrocketed, and he threw a legendary black and white ball that drew every influential name to the Plaza Hotel. It was a triumphant moment for Capote. The once overlooked boy from the South had become an arbiter of taste. Behind the scenes, however, he had been working on a far more scandalous project, an unfinished novel he teased as Answered Prayers. This fictionalized account scattered thinly disguised versions of the intimate secrets he had gleaned from these same friends. When excerpts finally appeared, they revealed adulteries, humiliating personal stories, and behind closed doors humiliations, some of which were unmistakably about Bill Paley and Babe. Rumors swirled of a passage that pointed to a certain Sidney Dillon standing in for Bill Paley, covering up a messy affair with the governor's wife. The lurid details of stained bedsheets and frantic concealment suggested an image of Bill as a desperate philanderer and Babe as an aloof, perfection-obsessed spouse. Whether the entire story was factual hardly mattered. It spread like a raging fire, scorching reputations and dissolving friendships overnight. Babe, already frail with health issues, took it as a gut-wrenching betrayal. She had shared her private fears with Capote, trusting he would shield her vulnerabilities. Instead, he turned them into sensational copy. She cut him off completely, refusing his letters and phone calls. For someone in the final stages of illness, the betrayal felt like a final act of cruelty. Capote, for his part, pretended not to understand why people were so furious. But the damage was irreversible. He had lost the affection of the very circle that once elevated him. In the end, the Cushing sisters' most treasured weapon, discretion, was obliterated in a magazine excerpt. Once Capote let that genie out of the bottle, there was no going back. Illness, loss, and the great unraveling. It might have still ended peacefully had Babe's health not taken a grim turn. Already plagued by health problems, she underwent multiple surgeries to remove portions of her lung, and her once impeccable demeanor deteriorated in waves of pain and morphine. Bill Paley, accustomed to controlling everything, sank into near panic as he watched her slip away. He scoured the globe for experimental treatments, refusing to accept that his flawless wife could be claimed by something he couldn't defeat. Meanwhile, Minnie faced her own struggles. Her husband, James Fosberg, battled terminal cancer, and she nursed him with a quiet devotion few people realized she possessed. The once vibrant woman who had hosted lively salons featuring world-famous writers and artists now stayed home, mourning the future she had tried so hard to choose for herself. Minnie's health then worsened, making it difficult for her to manage even simple social visits. The risk she took to gain independence ended in a tragic decline. Betsy, the last sister whose life seemed stable, also confronted sorrow. Jock Whitney's health failed after a series of heart issues. Although they tried to maintain their typical routine, philanthropic events, horse race, and visits from prominent politicians, time was catching up to him. In 1976, Jock suffered a massive coronary that left him frail and exhausted, and Betsy's world shrank to revolve around his care. By the late 1970s, the once inseparable sisters rarely saw one another in carefree settings. Babe, confined to a bed in her Manhattan apartment, limited her visitors to close family. Minnie was too fragile to wander far from her own home. Betsy and Jock clung to each other in the final stages of his life. In 1978, everything happened in rapid succession. Babe died at age 63, shielded to the end by silk turbans, carefully applied makeup, and a protective ring of staff who tried to maintain her legacy of perfection. Months later, Minnie followed. She was physically and emotionally spent, leaving behind a fortune not as large as the Astors, but still substantial enough to prove she hadn't needed them in the end. Bill Paley sought distraction through a flurry of social gatherings. Betsy buried herself in the remnants of Jock's philanthropic empire. She spent her final decades as the guardian of the Whitney name, though without her sisters, the old excitement had vanished. The end of an era. Was it all worth it? By the time Betsy passed in 1998, America was a different place. The society columns no longer held the same power. Families like the Astors and Whitneys still commanded respect, but the flashbulb era of insular social celebrity was winding down. People had turned their attention to movie stars, pop icons, and business titans of a new generation. What remains of the Cushing sisters today is an image frozen in old photographs, three radiant women in couture gowns stepping into benefit galas as cameras popped. The headlines from those days praised their poise but never dared to question the heartbreak they endured or the heavy trade-offs they made for that privileged existence. In many ways, they were the last wave of an older aristocracy that believed outward perfection meant victory. Underneath the gowns and jewels, they faced the universal challenges of love, betrayal, regret, and mortality. Minnie refused to remain in a suffocating marriage, even though leaving it broke the rules. Babe built a life around aesthetic beauty, yet privately fought loneliness, dealing with a distant husband and a friend's vicious betrayal. Betsy maintained the image of composure longer than anyone else, yet her final years were defined by watching her husband fade away. As for the mother who choreographed it all, Gogi never lived to see the sisters' final heartbreaks. She could not witness Minnie's escape from the Astor orbit, Babe's tragic death, or Betsy's lonely reign as the last survivor. Perhaps she would have been proud of their brief triumphs on society's stage, Or maybe she would have realized how empty such carefully orchestrated aspirations could become. In the end, the Cushing sisters' saga is both mesmerizing and cautionary. They entertained kings and presidents, shaped fashion trends, and were hailed as the personification of good breeding. But behind that gleaming veneer, their real lives tell a story of ambition, choice, and the silent toll of upholding an impossible standard. So, were they true architects of their own destiny, or merely actors in a sophisticated performance directed by someone else's script? The answer remains wrapped in the swirl of rumor and legend that trails after them, a final nod to the mystique they carried throughout their glamorous yet deeply complicated lives. The story of the Cushing sisters might read like an epic romance, full of elegance, romance, and unimaginable wealth. But at its core, it's a reminder that every dream exacts a price. They had rare privileges, yet each bore private burdens. Minnie's pursuit of personal freedom set her at odds with her siblings. Babe's quest for perfection masked a lonely reality. Betsy's devotion to her husband gave her stability but left little space for emotional openness. Their fall from grace wasn't a single catastrophic event. It was a slow unraveling of illusions. By the time all three were gone, that entire era of American high society was on the brink of vanishing, replaced by a faster-paced modern world with new icons and new values. Still, the Cushing sisters' legacy survives as a testament to what can happen when ambition, image, and tradition collide. Some see them as tragic figures trapped by their mother's impossible standards. Others view them as visionaries who understood how to harness the power of glamour to get what they wanted, if only briefly. In the end, perhaps the real scandal lies in how fleeting fame and power truly are. For a moment, they owned the spotlight, waltzing through the halls of aristocracy draped in couture. Then the music ended, and only memories remained. Whether you see them as pioneers of style or victims of their own creation, one truth stands. They shaped an entire era with their glittering presence, leaving behind a cautionary tale for anyone tempted by the illusions of perfection. And that, ultimately, may be the final lesson of the Cushing sisters. Even if you marry a billionaire, even if you top every best-dressed list, life can still break your heart. The real question is whether all the jewels in the world can ever mend it.